Morning, everybody. I'm Paul Diebold with the Irvington Historical Society, and this weekend we're practicing safe distancing, but we're going to show you a little bit of historic Irvington. This is the Benton house behind me. This house is very important to the history and culture of Irvington. I'll get to that in a minute, but what a great view Peggy had. Peggy's my camera person here of the beautiful, I think it's called Cilia, flowers that bloom every year in very many parts of Irvington. And she showed you the yard because the importance of this house is very much in that it shows what Irvington was supposed to look like. This was the idea, big lots with these very kind of what we would call Victorian romantic style houses. This particular style is called French Second Empire, and you can see that because it has the mansard roof. Francois Mansart was a French architect during the Renaissance, but during the 19th century in Paris, Napoleon III, the second emperor, decided to revive that bombastic style of Renaissance architecture. And a big part of that architecture was this French roof, this mansard roof. Sometimes in the 19th century they did call it a French roof. Now I'll show you something very interesting about this house that I discovered in the process of writing my Greater Irvington book. This is a pattern book house. I'll show you the pattern from which it derives. But first of all, we'll notice on the exterior the richness of the materials. Brick, and then the pediments over the windows, those are actually metal. Those are sheet metal. The brackets are wood. And going all the way up to the tower at the top, that's again pressed metal work around that bullseye window, or oculus window as we call them sometimes. Now it's hard to imagine, but this beautiful front door here, when the community came to restore this house in the late 60s, they bought it from the Miller family. The Miller family had decades earlier put a bungalow style porch around this entryway. So it came out from the corner towards where you're seeing right now, and around the corner here, kind of stuck out at the corner. We'll show you a picture of that when we go inside. But for now, it's just what a great view of the architecture, the beautiful bracket work. Very typical for an 1870 house. So let's go on inside. I've got my gloves on. We're being extra safe here. No one lives in the ground floor. We're not meeting a group of people or anything, so we're following all the guidelines. That's very important right now. Beautiful front door, original. And when you come in, this is what you see in these Victorian houses of this time period. A beautiful lathe-turned newel post and beautiful lathe-turned balusters on the stair railing. And look how big this is. My hand grips all the way around this, and beautifully shaped for your hand to grip as you're going up and down the stairs. Gorgeous stairway. When you come in here, we're in one of the front parlors. I'm going to call this up here while Peggy's showing you a few other things. See if this looks a little better now. Is that maybe not reflecting quite as much. This is a plan of Irvington. We're down over here off the plan, but you can see how big the lots were supposed to be. You can see how big they were supposed to be. And now here is the pattern. This is from a book called Bicknell's Village Builder. Now you can see this was a pattern for a wood frame house. Of course, the Benton house is brick. So some liberties were taken. Also, you'll notice the dormer windows are different here. Now they're conjoined into a triple window. But this is the original design. We have since found pictures from the 1890s before these dormers were combined by the Miller family. Also, you'll notice that the entryway slightly different, but by and large, this is the pattern of the house. Now, we don't know. This book was, this part of the book was actually an addendum. It was published in 1876. Bicknell accepted designs from other architects and builders and published them. Very often he would write something along the lines of, this house was built in New Jersey. It cost this many $1,000s to build. There's no note about where this design came from. So we don't know if Nicholas Omer, the contractor who built this house, submitted the design to Bicknell or whether he saw it in a Bicknell edition of that Village Builder book and emulated it. But clearly there's some kind of connection here, and that's very important because there were a couple other Irvington houses that were like this. There were about a dozen of these French Second Empire houses, and that's really the significance of the Benton house. It's the one that was left that was intact. So normally we would say that we, as preservationists, that we embrace change over time. And so normally we would say a bungalow porch on a house is probably a good thing to keep. But really the fact that this was the only one that still had its Second Empire architecture, that really outweighed it. We have a lot of houses with very excellent bungalow porches on bungalow houses. So that was the choice that was made. Believe it or not, the ceilings were lowered when this house was restored in the 1960s. They used to be a couple feet higher. It's hard to imagine, but very typical of this time period where the ceilings were so very high. Here's a beautiful pocket door here. These are original pocket doors. The flooring may have been added. This was more the fashion in the 19-teens, probably goes along with the bungalow rehab of the house at that time period, 19-teens, 1920s. The Miller family bought it from the Bentons. Of course, the Bentons were Dr. Allen Benton was the president of Butler University, so there's a very close connection with Butler University in this house. Of course, he had the best commute in the world. He walked 1/2 block out of his back door, and he was at work. Peggy's panning around the beautiful front parlor. Those shutter blinds, as they're called, those are original to the house. She's just panning very slowly around. We'll go on into this middle parlor here. This may have been a dining room. By the way, a beautiful mantle. Looks like stone, right? It's cast iron, very typical of this time period. Cast iron was used for a lot of architectural ornamentation and structural work at this time. It was a new material, and it could be grained like this to simulate expensive stone. The grate in the middle there was used for burning coal, which doesn't sound very appealing, but at that time coal was more modern. It produced more heat. Beautiful bay windows with the shutter blinds. You can see how elaborate the moldings are. The plan of this house also largely conforms to the plan seen in that Village Builder pattern. I didn't show you the floor plan, but there were floor plans included in that book. So we're going to head on back through here. Many of you familiar with the house know that this room for many years was a kitchen. And after an unfortunate water leak, this room was restored to a parlor sitting room type of appearance. But for many years, many of you remember a counter that would be right in front of me, right where I am here. The original kitchen is back roughly where it is right now. It was moved back about, what would you say, Peggy, maybe 15 years ago? Something like that?
Just a little peek of the kitchen there.
So we're going to go around the corner here and I'll show you. We'll close out.
Oh, what What about
Here's-
that? What about that one?
Oh, the dining room?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. Let's go in the dining room.
Can't forget the dining room.
And you can see this house is beautifully furnished with period antiques. I do not believe that any of these were ever actually in the house, but they're all very appropriate for an 1870s house.
A beautiful medallion.
And these are all period wallpapers. Again, these were not historically known to be in the house, but very appropriate to the time period. And you can see now how you could really, this was an ideal house for the Bentons. They could open these pocket doors and the doors here to the dining room and everything, and you could have a large group of people.
Still can.
In this house, you could entertain a lot of people, which, as president of Butler, they would have needed to do.
They still can. They
And
still
yes,
can.
you can rent this property. When we're through with all this business here, you'll be able to rent this property again. A lot of people have gotten married here, had various events. We've had family events here. It's a wonderful place for that kind of thing. So let's go on in towards the old, or the current edition. Here we go. Now here's what I wanted to point out to you. So here is a view of the house with the bungalow porch, and you can see how very different that made the house look. These are photographs and images of what the house looked like before the rehabilitation was done in the late 1960s. It was really very visionary for the Benton House Association to take this on in 1967, I believe it was. Really not many people were looking to restore houses out this far in Irvington. There were the beginnings of house restoration in the Old North Side area, but this was a real gem, and we're so very glad they had the foresight to save it for our use today.
The pictures are coming through as a little blurry, so you'll just have to come here and see them in person when things are calmed down.
So we're going to close out here by asking for your support in these times. Through this Facebook page of Irvington Historical Society, you can get to the Irvington Historical Society's website, and you can become a member. You can also become a member of the Benton House Association and Historic Landmarks Foundation of Irvington by going to their websites. I believe they're all set up to accept payments through Square, as is the Irvington Historical Society. So giving us a year membership, that helps us keep things moving along here. And of course, all these groups, they have not been able to stage events here, and they need your assistance, such as you can do. Again, thanks for joining me. And if you post questions to this, we'll get to them quickly as we can. Thanks, everybody. Hang in there.